Hi, thank you for joining me this morning. You are David D. Perlmutter. You are the Dean of the College of Media and Communications for Texas Tech University. You're a PhD, you're a professor, you're a dean. You have books, countless academic papers in magazines and in academic journals. So, why are you talking to me today?
Well, for the last 30 years or so, I have been a journalism professor as well as some other things. And I've studied under the umbrella of persuasion and political communication about basically how we persuade people to do something. And I tend to study like not like interpersonal persuasion, like within a couple or something like that, but like the big picture of countries and
hmm
big historical events. So I've focused a lot on visuals, on how famous news photographs or famous paintings or other kinds of famous images may have had some sort of political influence. I have done work on international communication, and oddly, or I think within that, but not so crazy. Years ago, I followed around the officers of a local police department. I did a project where what it was a one-person squad car, and I sat there and I went through their day. And this was for a couple of years. I took
hmm
pictures. It was what's called a visual ethnography, where I take pictures and I use that to sort of document what happened. It's sort of halfway between academia and journalism, right?
Uh-huh.
And I also talked to the officers because I was very interested in this question of taking police, law enforcement, true crime, now we call it true crime and criminal affairs. Most of us, luckily, don't have a personal experience where we see like how the police department works from the inside, unless we're a
Yeah.
police officer or we have a great tragedy befall us, like you and your family. So we're newbies when it comes to what's the world, but we've watched a lot of TV and we've watched a lot of movies, and we have
hmm
the stereotypes of like what the police are supposed to do and how they're supposed to act and what they're supposed to look like or talk like.
Yeah.
And so I was interested in how the people that we met, whether it was a victim or a suspect, just an ordinary bystanders, reacted to the police. I think based upon those media stereotypes and how police acted to some extent reflecting those media stereotypes because they live in the same society we do. And just to
Yeah.
give a quick example, there would often be the case that we would go through a shift, and this is Minnesota, and often I would be at the late shift, the dog shift, so like 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. in January. Not a lot of street crime.
hmm
There would be
Sounds
somebody
cold.
call it somebody. It was very cold. Missing persons. Big. We'll talk about that. There were a
hmm
couple of missing persons, and like, do you send 50 people into the woods at 2 a.m. when it's
No.
minus 40 to look for somebody, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we can talk about that because I think it's
hmm
in relation to your case there. And so I saw that the police also were going, like sometimes they would apologize to me, gee, Dave, we had no action in this shift. And I said, no, that's fine.
That's fine,
I'm
right?
here
Like,
to I'm here to document what you actually do. But
yeah.
I thought it was interesting that they realized the stereotype was that police officers have a life of nonstop action and violence, which is not true. As you know, most police officers never fire their gun and
Yeah.
certainly never shoot anybody. It's a dangerous job, but sometimes it's not a very eventful job for hours and hours and hours. So anyway,
hmm
so I've always been interested, and then probably about a year ago, I became interested in the phenomenon of true crime as a genre of media. We have a College of Media and Communication here. We have about 2,500 students. We produce a lot of people who work for corporations and for government doing their media. And I'm talking about everything like airlines and power companies and lawyers offices and police departments doing media. I just spoke a couple of weeks ago to the Texas Sheriff's Association, and I was talking about the importance of them not waiting for an incident to hold a press conference, but having a constant social media stream
Yeah.
explaining everything that what police do, making sure to build relationships, not just with the local newspapers, but with like people and bloggers and YouTubers and TikTokers.
Yeah,
So I'm
they
interested in
definitely should,
exploring.
because it's a lot of us against them that I
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
and that
And it
doesn't help
becomes that
anybody.
way. I mean, we'll talk about it, but like, for example, a couple just last week, I was talking to the people on the Missy Maura Murray podcast,
Hmm.
and they're it's not always that there's an antagonistic, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, relationship necessarily between family of a victim or a missing person and police, but there's a lot of seeds of that in the way
Yes.
that families think about things and the way police procedures. And then there's journalism, my journalism hat. So I discovered you through TikTok. I think you're doing an amazing job of being something that we want to show our students of independent content creation. You are not
Thank you.
financed by Jeff Bezos. you're,
No,
you're you're not a
I make no
subsidiary
money doing
of
this.
IBM. You're doing this all on your own.
Yeah.
I think there's so many lessons to learn there about creating that and the journey that you've made and the lessons you've learned. So I'm just very happy to be here to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I actually started out as a communications major in school, and I had a brief stint doing freelance journalism with MTV, and I was doing that for like 2 months, and then my sister went missing. So the way I view media and stuff, right, like at that moment, I was like, I can't do this, because there was something that was just so inauthentic when I was writing a story, and then when you become the story, it's something that you don't really think about if you are just like writing the story, or um yeah, it changes your perspective. So, but I'm excited to just talk about all of this.
I guess it would be helpful if people haven't been watching all of your TikTok or listening to all of your podcasts or are sort of new to the story. If maybe you told a little bit about the narrative, but focused on the relationship with media from the beginning. And then, of course, you have this amazing case study of American media jumping to Japan media, which are
Yeah,
very, very different,
yeah.
different culture, different ways of interacting with police and media. And you've already, I know, done some great work. I've listened to the podcasts of you talking about you and your mother in Japan and the culture shift and slams that you went through
Hmm.
there. But let's just talk about something real simple, is that when you found out that your sister was missing in Japan, did you have contact with New England area media? Did this become a story? Did you get phone calls?
It took a while for it to become a story. So, Skye left on April 1st, 2008. She took a one-way ticket to Japan. She didn't notify anybody, didn't tell anybody in the family. My brother had happened to, on his computer, she had used um, the computer a few times, logged into her email. So her password was saved there. We were able to log into her email, and we found the itinerary. Um, at that point, it was actually like 3 days after. It was probably April 3rd. And my mom had called the police, and we waited for them to show up, and it took about like 2 hours. And the police station's maybe like 3 miles down the road. They were just like, she's 21. What do you want us to do? You know? And when we were able to tell them about the itinerary, then they took it a little bit more seriously. But due to the fact that she went to Japan, the jurisdictions were different, and they were kind of out of their depth. So that's something to keep in mind. There is no protocol really, other than like file a missing persons report when somebody goes missing, and then that's it. So it wasn't
I'm
until,
going to interrupt you for a second there, because that's a really important point to unpack, is that police and journalists have protocols in place for cases that they come across. You report
mhm,
your car has been broken into. You report a stolen bike. right? Or you're speeding and they catch you speeding. They have a script. Journalists also have a script of plug and play, you know, local store robbed, you know, murder on Main Street, right? But the moment it starts getting more complicated, the moment it starts getting multi-jurisdictional, the moment roadblocks occur, it is out of the element. And of
Yeah.
course, they're focusing on day to day, right? So like on television, this is where we have this connection. It's like of like what happens on TV. The police chief calls Interpol, you know, and my friend Bobby at Interpol will now do an all points bulletin of planet Earth looking for your sister. That kind of stuff doesn't happen,
It
right?
doesn't exist. Yeah, that technology doesn't
But
exist.
we have certain expectations. You know, there's the CSI effect of like that suddenly this FBI crime team will black helicopter will come to your house
Yeah.
and they'll do a forensic computer audit of your computer and everything like that. But
Yeah.
these things are not within the normal range of what a local police department or local newspapers or magazines, TV stations do.
Yeah. No. No, it wasn't until we actually had to physically go to Japan because we weren't able, the police department here or the FBI wasn't able to do anything for us until we went to Japan. FBI actually didn't do anything for us at all. It wasn't high profile enough. And we had to physically go to Japan to file a police report there. We ended up holding a press conference, I believe it was like April 13th. And that was when we started getting media coverage.
And I'm sorry, you're saying so many great things. FBI. One of the expectations that people have is they're going to call in the FBI, right? But the FBI only comes in. Well, they can come in if they want to. I mean, but also
you have enough money.
Yeah, only if they come in. I mean, high profile enough case.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Phone call made, the FBI will show up. But normally, they don't investigate murders. They are charged to investigate kidnappings. And if somebody crosses state lines with foul intent, there's foul intent. And I think they also have jurisdiction. But interestingly, as I understand it, like if they go from if somebody kidnaps somebody and takes them from Massachusetts to Connecticut, the FBI can definitely get involved there. That's jurisdiction. But if somebody voluntarily gets on a plane and flies to Japan, no crime has been committed.
No. And as a 21-year-old, Skye was 21, she's an adult. There's no like paper trail of any mental health issues or any criminal activity. So there's no concern. So there's no crime in just leaving, essentially. It was definitely suspicious for our family. Nothing about it made any sense. But there was nothing that we could prove that there was something foul or anything, really. It was just, she just disappeared. What hurt, I feel like, the investigation was when the news started coming out from the American perspective. So there was an ABC News article and the headline was "Suicidal Students One-Way Ticket to Japan." And that word right there, suicidal, like.
How long was that after she disappeared?
That was April 16th.
So how many days after her disappearance?
16 days.
Okay, so this is what I find interesting and we talked about this with the Maura Murray case, is almost within a couple of weeks, a narrative has been established. And one of the problems, both in police work and journalism, is that once a narrative has been fixed, it's very hard to deviate people from it. They keep trying to, the new information that comes in, they try to fit into the narrative that's already there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They don't want to sway, hey, our previous headline was wrong.
Yeah, no, they won't do that. They may change the wording on a headline a little bit and then maybe make up for it in the context of the article itself. But like, if that headline says like the wrong thing or sets the narrative a certain tone, nobody, like, people have already made up their mind after they read a headline, you know? They may not read through it then. They may not care. Like, who's looking for a suicidal girl, you know?
Did that headline of suicidal, did did that get to Japan before you did when you
No,
showed?
no. So that came we held a press conference about, I think it was April 13th, in Japan, in Tokyo. We flew down to Tokyo because it was more of a like a major media hub. Because we were up in Sapporo and Hokkaido. That was, nobody goes there. Like, nobody that's like visiting from like anywhere else would go there. It's just not like a tourist destination. So in order to get the most media coverage, we flew down to Tokyo to hold a press conference there. The Japan Times headline was "American Woman Missing in Hokkaido." That's it. It was just like,
So that was, from your point of view, that was pretty reasonable. Just the fact
yes, yes,
American woman missing, there wasn't any assumption of anything.
no.
There.
It's only like 3 paragraphs long, and it just gave the facts, the story real quick. It didn't tell you what to think, you know?
Show her picture.
Hmm?
Did it show her picture?
It did,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Now you've said before on your podcast that, and you've mentioned just now, this area of Japan is not a high traffic tourist area. Westerners,
Yeah,
when you were walking down the street, you said you were often the only
only
Western
one.
there.
Everybody knew we were there.
And so one of the mysteries here is this related to media, is that if it got media attention in Japan, and eventually you're going to tell us, because you later on you said you were there was pretty large media attention, like you filled
Yeah,
up the room there. One of the mysteries is that she must have stood out pretty much for
of
her time.
course. Because the thing is, as soon as me and my mom landed, we were looking around and like, oh, they're gonna find her. Like, no questions asked. Like, we stuck out like sore thumbs. And my sister was bigger than me, and it was just, you could see her from space. Like, it is just that kind of environment, you know? So when we first got there, we were kind of like relieved in a way, because we assumed that she would be seen, because there was no way that she couldn't have been seen. And when we got to the embassy, they had like missing persons flyers, and then the way the community is set up there, there's like neighborhood like police posts, and they have missing persons flyers up. So her picture was up all over the place, and it was on the news. I remember after having the press conference, like, people knew who we were. I remember when I flew back, one of the flight attendants gave me like this charm and wished me all this like good luck. Everybody knew who we were
So
while
by
we
the
were there.
time you finished your first trip to Japan, and your first and last, right? Because you have not gone
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
First and last trip to Japan, you felt you got a lot of coverage there.
We felt pretty good about it because it was honestly the only way any leads came in. We had like 4 actual like substantial leads that were like legit. So that was helpful. Without the media coverage, we wouldn't have gotten any leads, you know?
So you see, I mean, this is something you've learned, which a lot of people, again, who we hope very few families have to go through this, is that this dependency. On the one hand, the media are saying things sometimes we don't like, that's inaccurate or intrusive. You've been very eloquent in talking. Your family is not a public family, right?
No.
There's no Kardashian gene
Nope.
in your family. And that's most of us, right? Most of us have
Yeah.
interest in like our lives being on the news or talk shows or something like that, right? But then on the other hand, the media are crucial, absolutely crucial
Hmm.
to getting to something as much as like, oh yes, I saw her
Yeah.
at this place at this time, right?
Hmm. It is, yeah, it was necessary. We couldn't have gotten anything without it. And I was thankful for the way that the Japanese media had covered it. I felt like once we started seeing the articles coming out from the States, I was me and my mom were both like, I'm glad she went missing in Japan, to be honest. Because it
Wow.
was just like, it was like a gut punch reading some of the articles. Just like the Associated Press one, I feel like was fine. But there was like, and there weren't too many. So there was probably like 4 articles that I actually remember from when, there you are. um, yeah, there was about like 4 articles that I remember. There was an ABC News one, which said the suicidal one. And there was an article that her college had put out that was just actually pulled, I think, from the AP. They kind of just took a few articles and kind of just put it together. I only remember talking to, which one was it? So it was, I remember being in Japan and we were starting to get emails from media back at home. And because of the time difference and because of like the way just the internet infrastructure worked, it was really hard to communicate back. So I remember I was trying to email one of the reporters and I wasn't getting back to him fast enough. Like I ended up calling him and I'm like, I think we need more time before we can release a statement, blah, 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 blah. And he like hung up on me. It was like that. And I was just like,
Yeah, so
like,
if we could talk about that for a moment. Again, this is where not only for journalism is there a script, but there's also a timetable, and that
yes.
timetable has radically changed over the years. I'm old enough to remember the news of the 1970s and 80s before the internet, and there was something called a news cycle. So,
Yep.
for example, you may have seen this in like older movies or something like that, where the physical paper is being printed at like 12:52 a.m. and like somebody runs in and says, "Stop the presses!" Right? There's a new headline, or they might even come up with multiple editions a day. But there was a certain time where you had to go to bed, like you had to
Mm-hmm.
put the paper to bed, and if you missed that deadline, then you were going to miss the paper, or you were going to miss the 11 o'clock news, or something like that. There was time to think about stuff.
Yeah.
Also, reporters, and this is really an important aspect of this, is the average journalist was hardworking, but did not have to produce as many stories as they do
Mm-hmm.
now,
Yeah.
and there were multiple layers of editors above them. Now, the average journalist working for a local paper or broadcast station has to produce a lot more stories in a day, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to edit them themselves. And there's probably going to be like maybe one layer of editing or none before it goes there. So
Yeah.
the pressure to just get it done and move on to the next thing is tremendous. And if
Yeah.
you don't cooperate, then
Then they're gonna move on.
yeah, they're going
Yes.
to move on, or you get like the facts are mixed up or
Yep.
something. There's a famous phrase long ago that journalism is the first draft of history, and one of the things I've done in my career is I've studied those first drafts. They're always wrong.
Right? I know. I go through some of
Always
the
wrong.
articles and there's just
Yeah,
tiny little things that are wrong, and I'm just
yeah.
like I understand the process. Like I always try to just see both sides of things, but I'm just like it's unfortunate that
And those errors get embedded,
yes,
and trust me, like 30 years later, somebody writes a story, they're still there. Like
yes,
they're like a
yes,
tick, you know.
yeah, yeah.
News,
You can't
I call them
you can't
information
change it.
ticks. They just latch on, and like unless somebody's gone back to the original, if there was a court case, gone to the original court documents, the original transcripts, the coroner's report, missing persons report, unless somebody's looked at the original interviews with people, those news ticks can just stay forever in
Yeah.
the public consciousness. And there's so many famous cases. True crime has made this a lot of attention to this, where if you go back, you're like, everybody knows this about John Benet Ramsey, and you go back and like, no, it was
That
never true.
yeah.
It was something somebody got wrong, the fifth day, and it's just stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck there. Now, going back to Japan, um, Have you tried to keep in touch with, I mean, I know you've kept in touch with the embassy somewhat, but like Japanese media, have they followed up with you?
No. Basically, I mean, when we maybe like 2 weeks after we got back from Japan, like a talk show had reached out and were like, we want to do like a reunion special if you find her. But that was it. Um, Basically, as soon as we left, that was it. And right now, I reached out to the embassy and I wanted to get the police report from Japan, and I can't have access to it unless I get a lawyer due to like privacy laws. They told me I can't have access to it due to its sensitive nature.
So even though you're the family, so there's a file there
Mm-hmm.
and you've never seen it.
Nope.
And is that a matter of jurisdiction, or this is Japanese police practice? Like if you were Japanese, do you think they would say something different?
Oh, I
I don't know
don't
if
know.
anybody
I
answered.
think it's something. I think it's both of those, and even the because I asked the person at the consulate like who, like what do you have any? Can you recommend a lawyer? And they were like, no.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow. So
yeah.
this was a question that I asked as a thought experiment for the Missing Maura Murray podcast folks. Is that as the case actually didn't happen far from where you are,
Hmm.
but it was also a case of somebody. I think she was like 21 or 22 or something.
21. Yeah,
Yeah, and
same.
she's she's missing, and there's no crime still listed as having
Yeah,
been committed. And I said, so a thought experiment. You're the podcaster. They have no relation to the family. I mean, they're not like relatives or anything like you are.
hmm,
But suppose you're the police chief and you get a in Japan, or I guess in with the Mortimer case in like New Hampshire or something, and you get a phone call saying, "I'm so and so. I'm an adult. I ran away. I'm okay where I am now. Stop looking for me." I'm not sure what a police department in the United States would do, because that is an adult and we have a right to privacy in the US
yes.
Constitution. So if somebody said like I have no interest in talking to my family again, I'm out, just stop looking for me. I Some of the things that the police have done in that case lead me to and I'm not an expert, but like, it's almost you almost wonder whether they've already got it solved and they just can't
They
talk
can't
about
say
it.
anything.
Um
Like Japanese, Japan has a lot of strict privacy laws,
yeah.
so there could be that. You
So,
know,
so it is a possibility that they know what happened, but
they can't say
if
anything.
something, well, I mean, obviously this is bad happening, but like if something worse bad happened, you'd think that they would be able to tell you.
I believe so, but I remember like early on, they let us know that they can kind of like let us know that they found her, but it would be up to her to contact us. And I think due to the fact that we were like Americans in Japan, they would give us that courtesy of being like, "Hey, we found her," but that's it. That's all we can say.
Yeah, and I just feel so bad for families in these situations. And of course, one of the things that's clear as you listen to these different true crime cases, and I'm sorry by the way if I'm putting you under the genre true crime, as if like your life story is a genre.
It's okay.
Every family is its own and human.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I don't necessarily consider it a true crime because technically a crime hasn't been committed. And that's what's frustrating because there's like you're in this gray area. You're constantly in this limbo.
And
And
we don't
then
know in many of these cases. I mean, some of them we do, and there's been a court case and all that stuff.
yeah.
But some of them, yeah. Do you feel that there's anything more that if you had it all over again, just talking about media,
Mm.
sounds like you said yourself, the Japanese media did what seemed helpful at the time.
Yes. Yes.
Is there anything more that could have been done or should have been done? And since then, I mean, obviously, I guess you wouldn't mind if they kept doing. update stories and still missing, right?
Yes, yes. If they could do updated stories. But I think, I mean, when you're in the throes of it, the anxiety, the fear, the just like you don't know how to react to something like that. And you don't know who you are as a person when until you're in that situation, until you react. Um
Let's talk about that. I'm sorry. Every time
it's
you
okay.
speak, you say something really interesting. And I keep interrupting you, so I apologize. But like, I, we produce people here in our college who end up being specialists in crisis communication, and and
Mhm,
and this is the disparity. And I actually used your case, I think, in the Maura Murray podcast as an example of disparity. If you're the Ramsey family, you you know not only are you used to dealing with media, but you can hire 3 publicists and 4 lawyers
mhm.
and call the police chief and call the president, the FBI. I mean, I don't know whether that actually happened, but the point is you have resources, you have
Yeah,
capital
yeah, yeah.
resources, you have social resources, you have political resources. You're an ordinary family that didn't have any of that. And
Yeah.
you go to pay for a trip to Japan must have been a huge stretch for your
Yeah, it was my mom and I we just put everything on our credit cards. We just split it and then yeah, within like 2 weeks it was like over 10 grand of just expenses. And
yeah.
then the thing is like when you're in that situation, yeah, you've seen you've watched movies, you've watched TV, you think you know what's going to happen and you're relying on these systems, the laws, the police to kind of help you guide you through it. But the thing is they don't know
There's no play.
either.
Yeah, again, if you hire one of our graduates who's working for an airline, they know what to do because
Hmm.
they've planned everything in advance.
Yeah.
But if you're an ordinary family, there's almost no one to turn to. I mean,
No.
not even the lawyer can really help you
No.
with what to do with, like, again, working with the media.
Yeah.
One piece of advice that I mean, nobody's asked me, but I would think in that situation, which you've done organically, is that to have a spokesperson for the family, to not
Hmm.
have like every cousin having their own theory and
Yeah.
tossing it,
That
like
gets messy.
the family sort of coming together and saying, okay, whenever the media reaches out, cousin Joe is going to be our spokesperson,
Yeah. But
and
I
and
think when you
you've done
see
that, right?
you, the thing is, it depends on the family. And it
Right.
depends because everybody in my family has reacted differently to the situation. And nobody stepped up. I saw my dad crumble. I saw my mom just go inward and my brother just disappear somewhere. So nobody, um, it just depends on like your family dynamic. I never really had a conversation with my family being like, I'm going to talk about this
Right.
until after I start talking about it because it's so uncomfortable because everybody's been so affected by it in their own way. And you don't want to ruffle feathers because it's like I'm trying to be empathetic enough to my family because I know they want answers, but they don't know how to actually find answers or how to be comfortable speaking about it. And they put being from my parents being from a different generation, they put a lot of trust in the police and the powers that be only to feel just let down and just destroyed by not.
Relationship with media and the police creates its own stressors in the family.
Yes, yes.
And sometimes, like, why is so and so getting all the attention? And also, as I've seen in the few cases that I've looked at, there's differences of opinion in families. If you
Oh
look at
yeah.
like the news coverage of some of the other cases, the mother will be saying something different than the father, than the cousin, like
Yep.
entire speculative theories that are different about what
Yes.
happened, right? And
Yes.
of course, in some family dynamics, somebody has some guilt there too. But
Hmm.
the point being that it's just very, very hard for ordinary folks, which are 99% of us, to react well in this situation and to do the
Yeah.
smart thing. And it's all retrospect.
Yeah. Like there was so many silly things that we did in the beginning. Like I know on the missing persons flyer, it had my own personal email address on it to be contacted. And my parents' phone number, my home phone number at the time, was on the missing persons flyer in Japan. And something like that should have been, it should have just been like the consulate or the police or a separate email that could be accessed by a few people if needed to assess this. Because I
That's a
started
great
getting,
that's a great protocol there.
mm-hmm,
Is immediately create a contact email like, missing Skye at
yes,
gmail.com.
yes, something
Don't
so simple,
Yeah,
but it's something like when you're
or
in the
buy a
moment.
burner phone. That's
Yeah,
all,
exactly.
you know.
When you're in the moment, you're not thinking about that. And everybody, like my mom went completely blank. Like when we discuss like our trip to Japan, she remembers things completely differently than I do because of the stress. Like you don't know what you're going to take in and what you're not going to take in and how you remember things. But I remember getting emails, like when I would get home, when we got home from Japan, I was getting emails on my personal like email account. I was 24 at the time, and it was from people just trying to extort us for money, saying that we know where she is. She's locked in a basement, and send money this way. And I was just like, what do I do with this? Like why was this on me? Because we just didn't think of it, because the protocols weren't in place to let us know, like, hey, let's set up a separate email. Like, I went into it because I saw how my family was reacting. I went into it trying to be like a hero, but like, even with good intentions, you're just going to make mistakes. Like something like that I shouldn't have been handling. And I remember trying to forward it to the police or the FBI, and I got no response. I got nothing. I ended up doing my own like research in the email address and trying to find it. And then I connected with somebody else who had a similar case to mine, and they were also receiving emails from the exact same person.
I don't think most people know about that. And this
Oh
brings
yeah.
up the question in the 70s and 80s when we said the media. I'm old enough to remember my parents were educated, they were professors, and we subscribed to like two or three newspapers, and we got a magazine called Time magazine. We got a magazine called Newsweek, which I think my students have no idea what those are.
What?
Uh, and we watched the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And
Mm-hmm.
my parents, our household got a lot of information. We
Yeah.
were sort of information rich, and they're probably maybe too much. But it was a time when the media was really a very small number of defined channels and
Mm-hmm.
medium there. Now the media are everybody, right?
Yeah.
So people, what you just said, people, I don't think a lot of people know that like, okay, I'm going to get my phone number out there, I'm going to get my email out there, I'm going to get in from the public and help find my sister, and then you get some evil scum.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately their first thought is, I will try to extort money
Yeah.
from this tragedy. And then you go to Reddit, right, or something like that, and
Yep.
people are making positive comments, people are maybe making some helpful observation, but there's also people saying, oh, it's obvious that that uncle must have done it, or some just
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
crazy stuff that
Yes.
is very hurtful and destructive to anybody who from the family who touches it.
Yeah. I was actually watching one of the Maura Murray like specials on TV. And something that I found really interesting is Maura went missing maybe like 4 or 5 days after Facebook actually launched. And
Yeah,
so,
people say that she was like the first missing person of the social media era.
yeah. But you know what? To be honest, that was probably a really good time because people weren't pushing the limits of what is appropriate to put online. People were still had some common decency. But in 2008, when I started, I made a YouTube video and I put it out there for to help find Skye, and I put it on social media, and it was disgusting. It was awful. So at that point, people started getting a little bit more brazen with how they were acting online, because there was still a lot of you can hide behind the screen.
And there's been research in our field, communications, and in computer science for many decades. I mean, going back to the early, I mean, you're too young to remember bulletin boards in the sort of pre-social media era where
I know.
flame wars over like Journey fans,
Yeah, yeah,
fighting.
yeah. Like forums and like message boards. I
Yeah,
remember all
yeah,
that.
yeah. Oh,
I'm
okay.
older. I'm older than you think.
But so anytime you give somebody the shield of pseudonymity or anonymity, we have research that shows people will say and do things that they would
Yes.
never do face to face.
Yeah.
And now that is metastasized into just an all-out free-for-all, just
Yeah.
meanness. Not
Yeah.
not like I want to make a political point, or something like that, but just people who are on the internet and social media and Reddit, whatever, just to hate. That their
Yes.
one goal is to make people feel bad. And we were mentioning when we're starting, we're both animal lovers, and so I see a lot of animal TikToks, hamster TikToks, hamster TikToks. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
why are there trolls on hamster TikTok and cat TikTok? And you read the comments, and yes, the majority of comments will be, "Boy, that's a beautiful cat." But
Yeah.
then somebody took time out of their day to say, "Your hamster is ugly; it should die."
I
And I'm
know.
going like, that human being is somebody that I bump into at United probably. And they hold a regular job. They're probably not, an actual troll in the basement with like, one eye sticking out
I
or
know.
something like that and a humpback. They're probably a normal person in real life.
Yes.
And they got onto a hamster TikTok just to say
Just to
something.
hate. Yeah.
And
I
then
know.
imagine that, scaled up to missing persons and true crime,
Oh, yeah.
and
I
it's
know.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
You've suffered it.
Luckily, I don't take it too personally when I do come across it. I'm just like, man, sometimes I feel like I waste my time just like staring at a wall, but like at least I'm not doing that kind of shit. It's low. But I remember like so early on we tried to use social media, but it backfired. It was really upsetting. Um so we kind of didn't go that route because it was like just full of just meanness. Because there's still some like anime message boards and forums and even on Reddit about Skye's case, like older posts. And there's a lot of like grossness. I remember when like I had a hard time dealing with this, obviously. It's kind of rough. But I ended up moving. Like I had to leave Connecticut. I live in California now. I kind of had to run away from it because my parents weren't dealing with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. And I remember being here in Los Angeles and I go on Reddit because like every once in a while, like I do deep dive to see if I find anything on Skye. And I found somebody on Reddit who knew where I lived even after I got married, changed my name and left, you know. And it gets a little crazy. And it wasn't until actually the pandemic and having a son that I actually knew I kind of had to do I had to do more with this. And that's why I started my husband had recommended doing TikTok, just, talk about the story, talk about Skye, talk about your feelings, put it out there and just see what happens. And social media is a different place now. It's a little bit nicer and I'm a little older so I can handle it a little bit better. And it's been so good now. And even if trolls come along, I just like whatever.
But you can imagine somebody that maybe doesn't have your savviness or your temper, that you can take this and move on. How and how traumatic it is. I mean, it's traumatic in any way, but like
Hmm.
to anyone who's gone through some great loss, it is like you're going through. It's a double crime.
Yeah.
Social media,
Yeah.
you're kicking the victim again,
Hmm.
the victim's family, and it's really just remarkable to me. I sometimes in my more dark moments, I think about advocating real name only, on the internet. Like that would be like a law that says you can't have an anonymous or pseudonymous presence. Obviously, that would create a whole bunch of other problems. But boy, the amount of trollness would
Yeah.
would if your picture and your home address were right next to every internet comment you made.
I mean, it's so easy to like find people out these days anyways, you know?
Yeah,
So,
well, that's something else. You display a certain technological sophistication because I think again, the average mom whose like daughter goes missing or something like that, who may be in their 50s,
mhm.
and I'm not being ageist because I'm old myself, but may
You're not
not
gonna, yeah.
may not be like finding. Have you ever confronted anyone? I mean, if you looked somebody up and like said, "Hey, I know who you are. You wrote this comment. Why did you do that?"
I don't think they deserve my time. I can look them up and know who they are and keep an eye on them. I have no problem doing that if it becomes an issue. But if it's like a one off, I don't really care. So,
What would you tell other families that are going through this in terms of a playbook for when time has passed? Because right now we're how long since Skye has disappeared?
14 years.
And what I've noticed is that for example, in some of these longer missing cases, they're still showing the pictures of and by the way, I love your comment on this. There's a sort of problem there in that when you show pictures from when somebody's younger, there's more sympathy
Yeah.
because you think, oh, this young girl and her family, right? When
Yep.
they show those age progression pictures, I've never done an experiment on this, but I wonder whether, like, okay, it could be helpful, and I don't know the science of it, so I don't know how many
Yeah.
people actually look like age progression, and you'd think like, well, what have they gone through, or whatever, what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But my theory has always been that that reduces sympathy because first it makes it look like, oh, they're alive somewhere, they're just older, right?
Yeah.
And then second, well, younger animals, younger humans, we're just more sympathetic. We're programmed by evolution,
Mhm.
right, to care more about babies than me.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So, what are your thoughts on that?
I've had a lot of people ask me to do like an age progression on Skye. So Skye was 21 when she went missing. And I look at photos of myself at 21 and photos of me now. I don't see a huge difference that couldn't just be kind of assumed, I guess. I have reached out to a forensic artist and I would have to supply photos of everybody in the family and like how long time has gone by. But ultimately, I'm just like, we're pretty similar looking. And I'm just like, just look at me. Like, like she's probably looking at like me or just a variation of this. I never pulled the trigger on it because another thing that I like, something I would tell other families of missing people is that everything costs money. Everything. So if you want to
And
get
there's
a
no
forensic,
insurance policy, right? That's the
yeah,
other thing is that almost every other tragedy that or happenstance that befalls you, hail that damages your car.
hmm,
You most middle class people have somebody to go for recompense, but there's no. I mean, I guess maybe the super wealthy may have kidnapping insurance. I think I've heard it exists or like missing insurance, but you don't think of your normal State Farm policy to
I don't think
cover.
that, I think there would be like an exemption. To be
Yeah,
honest, they'd write it into the fine print that you wouldn't see. Like they're not going to pay out. But like just to get a forensic photo, it's about like 450. To get just a lawyer, it's a lot. I
yeah,
remember,
and a lawyer in another country.
and like then a translator, and then getting a private investigator. So something people are like, oh, get a private investigator. So a private investigator isn't going to have access to the police records. The police don't need to hand that over to them. A lot of times in some cases, I know the Maura Murray case, they didn't want to hand over the police records to the family, you know? So there's so like a private investigator, I think just to get one on retainer back in 2008, it was like 8,000. And then they also needed a translator and just like every, any other thing that comes along with that.
Yeah.
So it runs into a lot of money. And then there's also, if they do like a ground search or anything like that, sending out helicopters, money. The police will only
I wanted to ask about that. There was no, I mean, again, the media stereotype, a young girl goes missing in a small town in Ohio, hundreds of people show up to comb the woods, right? And there was some version of that with Maura Murray, but there was complications with like people, which I didn't know. Like people who had private property said, "Nope, you can't search my property." I'm going like, "Wow, that's problematic, isn't it?"
Yeah.
That somebody near where somebody went missing says you can't search my property. But anyway, I don't know if there's a law like that in Japan. Was there any search in Japan?
They
Like
did.
actual people going out looking?
They did like a helicopter search of the area, but like extensively, no. They just kind of like looked from above,
Did they do an electronic search? I mean, obviously, one of the scenarios is Skye may have gone to this place in Japan and then left and gone to another place,
Mm-hmm.
either within Japan or anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But again, this is a media stereotype, is like a police officer sits in front of a computer, 5 clicks, and like, well, we have no record of anyone traveling anywhere in Japan under this passport, and nobody's left the country under this passport. That's not possible. The passport question. I mean, that she didn't leave 3 days later under her passport. I mean, I just always assumed that a U.S. passport is
I believe that could be flagged.
but not
But
found.
the thing is, they let her in, and like the Japanese protocol is to either have like a visa on file or a ticket out. So
she had a ticket out.
nope,
Don't know that.
no, she had no ticket out, and they just saw like a young woman like crying, upset, and they just let her go. So even if you have protocols in place, they may not always be adhered to. And so they let her in.
By the embassy. I mean, has somebody physically told you that there's no way to track whether her passport was used to leave the country? That record doesn't exist. Or
No. I feel like I have asked that outright, and I feel like it wasn't being tracked in the same way at that time or something. But ultimately, like, nothing has ever come up with her passport again, from what I've been told.
was it flagged at the time? So if she 3 days later flew to Jakarta, would the Jakarta authorities flagged her U.S.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah.
So you think that you have evidence that she didn't fly to a third country?
I don't think she flew anywhere.
Back to the United States?
I don't think so. No.
Because we're going back to the fact that, yeah, in that part of Japan, you and your mom stood out, probably your sister stood out.
Mm-hmm.
So people saw her for a couple of days, but there were no sightings reported to you after you came there or after you left.
So the first day we got there was April 10th. By the time my mom was able to get a passport and us to get out there. She was last seen on April 10th in Nobori-Betsu at an inn. So we had...
So the day that you got there was
the last day she was seen.
Last seen.
Yes, but we didn't
find out about that until later.
Until later, yes, because we had the press conference on the 12th or the 13th. I believe it was the 13th. So by the time it was like an evening press conference, it hit the news that night, like the TV news that night, and in the morning it hit newspapers. And then we started getting the leads like up to like maybe only like 3 days where there was actually significant like valid leads. There was an Austrian man at a metro stop that had helped her get a ticket because she couldn't figure it out at the kiosk. There were the people at the inn in Nobori Betsu, and then there was a taxi driver. And that was it.
And the last date was April 10th.
April 10th was the last
You
day
were
she was
there.
seen.
And
Yep.
because in a lot of missing person cases, I mean, even silly things like Elvis is still being cited and things like that, but you don't have a sighting after April 10th.
No. Not that I know of, unless it's like in the police report in Japan.
Okay.
You know.
If you could make one thing happen, I mean, obviously, aside from finding your sister, but like procedurally or in media or in police, what would you like to have happen?
I think having a standardized protocol for when something like this happens. I know it's rare. And I would also like for families to know the realities of it. Like there are strict timelines where it is essential for you to get out there and start looking, for you to report it. And I know like in my sister's case, we didn't even know she was missing until like 2 days after because she was 21. Was staying at a friend's dorm. And my mom was so excited because she's so like introverted that my mom was like, yes, please go. Please enjoy your life. Be a college student, be an adult. Awesome. So we didn't think much of it. And then not having like, if the police could take things a little bit more seriously when they first happen, even if it does turn out to be just somebody having a bad day and running off, you know, the fact that we knew she went to the airport, we had the itinerary. The police just told us, go see if you can find her car. And what happened this year, I was finally able to contact the Southington Police Department. I got a new detective. The detective knew nothing about this case, had never heard about it. And the first thing he asked me was, did you find the car? And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, we went to the airport. It was my parents and then my boyfriend, now husband at the time. And we're like, yeah, we found the car at the airport. We looked through it. We didn't know what to do. So we took it and drove it home. And I'm like, my parents.
That breaks every rule of police procedure.
Yeah.
That the family is going to be looking through the car, touching everything, moving things around.
Yeah.
But you didn't do anything wrong because you were sent there by the police.
Yeah.
But from the point of view of like forensics or this is, I mean,
yep.
This is where we always talk about truth is stranger than fiction. Just imagine a CSI show where the CSI guy,
police just tell you, go solve it.
we don't have much time. Do you want to like do your own autopsy? No, do you want to like check your car? I mean, just but in real life, police departments have very limited personnel.
Yep.
They have limited time because like crime doesn't stop just because one incident has happened. They also have protocols themselves, which is you're telling us a 21-year-old decided to do something and you have no evidence that any foul play or anything was happened. I mean,
yeah.
Because often, you know, family will say, this is so unlike her, or that he would have never done this. You understand how police have a certain rolling of the eyes because they've seen so many cases where the wonderful son that everybody said was a great son actually did rob those banks.
Yeah.
And the family just didn't know about it. I mean, there's a saying among police, the family are the least knowledgeable about their own kids.
Yeah. I can believe that. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it may be true in many cases.
Yeah.
So there's a protocol. And there's also playing the odds, and this is true for journalism and for the police, right? Is that a woman is murdered, let's check out the husband or the ex-boyfriend, right? And because the odds are like overwhelmingly in cases of a woman being murdered, you know, it is the ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Right?
I
But
mean, even in a
the
situation
problem, go
like
ahead.
this, I looked at my own family differently because of how everybody reacts differently to a situation like this. Where I'm like looking at my dad, I'm like, how are you not, how is there no emotion? And same with my brother. And then because that's also like what I've seen on TV and through media. And I'm just like, this is toxic. It becomes really toxic when you start believing the things that you've seen on TV, you know? It's crazy. But
Well,
yeah, and
one of the good pieces of news about, and again, I keep referring to true crime, even if your case doesn't fall in that category, but just the sort of, I guess, mystery, unsolved mystery phenomena, is that there are emerging journalists. I mean, there's money there now. I
yeah.
mean, these true crime podcasts, some of the ones are huge hits, and people are their entire livelihood is now, mystery cases.
Yeah.
And the regular media have Dateline and NPR with the serial.
Hmm.
It has been noticed that if you do long form investigative journalism, that there is a profit
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
so there's more and more of that actually being done now, whereas there was a real dip because it was so expensive and it just didn't seem to pay off. So
Hmm.
one piece of good news is that this genre has made us look at cases with greater depth than has ever been maybe before it.
Yeah. I think, yeah, if I remember trying to start a podcast maybe in like 2015, and there wasn't just, I couldn't, nothing was happening. I just like scrapped it because it wasn't, I had no, I had no platform. Nobody knew who I was. And I'm just talking about, you know, my missing sister. And it just didn't, it just wasn't working. Like I couldn't, it wasn't the right time or place for it. Um, but now like times have changed. And it is like, it is definitely, I feel like I was able to like talk about it at the right time, even though like 14 years have passed. But I also remember something to note. It was 2008, and the news cycle was Obama, Hillary. It was the president, a year of a presidential election. So even if like 500 people went missing, I guarantee maybe like two would be covered, just because of
There's the luck of the draw of what else is
really.
going on,
Yep.
right, at the same time
Yep.
there. Well, this has been very educational for me, and I want to thank you for your time. And I think our students will learn a lot from it
I
because
hope so.
we certainly want to produce people who work again all over. We train people to make movies in Hollywood. We have a gaming lab.
Oh,
Gaming is the
cool.
largest media industry. Uh, we also do all the areas of marketing, branding, public relations, advertising. But one core that runs through it is that we think that finding accurate information and then translating it to non-specialist audiences in a story format is what we do, because we're human beings have told stories our whole existence. Before there
Hmm.
was history itself, we told stories, right? And the trusted storytellers were the ones who got it right.
Yeah.
And that's a real struggle today in this just empire of misinformation
Yeah.
and bad information and toxic information. And so I think you're a hero for what you've done, not just for your own family and in this one case, but for the rest of us who really need to understand all the challenges out there. You've told us about stuff that I don't think people understood the cost of what you've paid
Yeah.
trying to help. And I know from your podcast and your TikTok, you're not just trying to help your sister and your family, you're trying to help us all. And so
Oh,
you
thank
deserve
you.
the thanks of a grateful nation, to use a poetic phrase.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I was just trying to just get through the day most days. But yeah, I just always wanted to kind of share the realities of it and the struggles that come along with it and just trying to get through just one day at a time because the systems that we have in place that we are told to trust aren't always going to work out for us the way we think. And it's not like a bad thing, but you do have to address it. So then it can be changed, or you can come at it in a different way to make it work. I wish, I was able to do more earlier on, but there's so many variables in place when things like this happen, like where you're from, your age, your life experience. Like everybody reacts differently to it, and you need to always factor in like the odd character, because not everybody is, I don't know, Nicole Kidman or something. Not everybody's like playing this grand character, or a character that knows what to do and how to handle things.
I think you said
So,
something else. I guess we could go on for many hours because
yeah,
everything you
sorry.
said is so important. But no, but you just said something else, and we talked about this a little bit. Is that somebody goes missing, and then everybody talks about they did this, they did that, they did this, and everything is parsed and analyzed to death.
Hmm.
And we often forget human beings are odd.
Yeah, yeah,
We are not robots. We don't pre-program ourselves. You know, yeah, we eat lunch every day at the same diner, but that one day we ate lunch at McDonald's, and somebody would say, "Oh, they would never go to McDonald's." But yeah, but that day they did, and it has nothing to do
yeah,
with them being killed. They just happened to go. So that's one of the challenges. Is again with too much information, misinformation, over analysis is a real issue
yeah,
of
yeah,
cases, and it gets in the way of maybe solving some cases out there. But
yeah. Like some things may seem odd, but they have no relevance to the case whatsoever. But people get stuck on those things, and that hinders the advancement of moving forward with your life or the case or anything.
so one final question: did you mention that you were thinking about going back to Japan?
I would like to. I am currently waiting on uh, the detective in Southington had found that the my parents' DNA was stuck in the Connecticut State Lab after all these years. So I'm waiting for the a black notice and a yellow notice for Interpol. Unfortunately, they have been understaffed because of the conflict in Ukraine, and there's a backlog of over like 3,000 missing persons cases, and there's only like two people in the department right now.
Wow,
Yeah,
that is an incredible fact. I mean, we see the overwhelmingness of like baggage handling at the Amsterdam airport, but you think about 3,000 missing cases, probably going back decades,
hmm,
and there's two people there
yeah,
filing away.
and yeah. So I'm waiting for something like that. And like with COVID happening, I didn't. Something else you have to consider. You have to consider the other country's culture and the. I as an American, we're considered very arrogant, and like you know how we're probably perceived by many other countries. I'm not about to run into Japan and cause a scene. That's disrespectful. And if I want results, if I want like help, I have to like do it in a respectful way. So I've always wanted to go back to Japan. If I don't get any hits with the Interpol, then yeah, ultimately I would like to go back to Japan. I still need to get a lawyer to get the police records. If there's anything there, there's certain. It's never easy. I can't just go and get on a plane and show up. Like, nobody will help me. Like, that's the reality. I can't just show up at the consulate, even if I email them now. Like, there's very little that they can do. It's
Well,
frustrating.
we have great sympathy for your situation, and you've also taught us about empathy for how many people are also going through this, thousands and thousands of people,
Yeah.
and we have to keep them in mind and also try to understand how we can try to fix media and law enforcement systems to be more proactive and kindly. I mean, there's a TV show out there I've never watched, but I remember the police telling me that most crimes or cases are solved in 48 hours or they're not. I mean,
Hmm.
when everything is fresh, the witnesses are fresh, the evidence is fresh, that's when you have a moment there. And I also remember police saying, luckily, most criminals leave, I mean, proverbially drop their wallet and leave their fingerprints
Yeah.
everywhere. There are very few criminal masterminds. Usually, people who get away with something are people who are completely unconnected to the person, or
Hmm.
they're lucky. They just, you know, the
Yeah.
CCTV camera was out of action that morning or something
Yeah.
like
But
that.
nowadays, like everybody has like a Ring camera on their
Yeah,
house or in their car. There's like
yeah,
so much more. I remember, like, yeah, it just didn't exist in 2008. And you think it would because it wasn't that long ago. But like, even when we asked like the airport for their cameras, they're like, oh, you don't see anything on these things.
yeah, yeah. But you still see so many cases, and we have just recently with the Gabby Petito case, the Moab murders, where yeah, the technology is there, but like it's still there's a lot of holes
Yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And some cases get, I mean, the Gabby Petito case gave attention to Gabby Petito, but also gave it attention to like, well, there are 40 other, I mean, when they were
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the her I guess I say alleged because like he was never tried, he killed himself, her boyfriend, what did they find, like six other bodies
Yeah.
where they were looking for him? And
How
so there's
crazy
six
is
other
that? That
cases.
alone. That like how is nobody out there looking? I feel like there should be a job in place where, people
Yeah.
just hike around and look for people, I guess. I mean, it's kind of dark, but like you gotta do that work. Like you gotta create something to actually make people feel safe. And if it is within like the police department, I mean, they have so much PR work that they need to do because like I don't I'm when like let's say you get pulled over, like are you excited or are you nervous when like you get pulled over by a cop? I'm never just like, oh, this is gonna go well. It's just even if I did nothing wrong, even if it's just like I knew what I did wrong, it's there's a lot of work that they need to do, a lot of like rebranding to just help.
Yeah, and again, I'm not defending journalism or police. I mean, I think they're both very difficult jobs, and it's
Yeah.
there's an old saying that it's very easy to be a policeman in a police state, right? So we are
Mm.
not yet. We're not a police state. There are many laws and lawyers and codicils and their difficulties in covering crime stories in being a police officer. But I do think that the more we have these kind of exchanges where people learn about what somebody else is going through, that maybe we'll have general improvement in the way that,
Yeah.
and more education of the public, so that, God forbid that this happens to anybody else, but like the next person that this happens to, they may have seen your podcast and it
Yeah.
happens to their family and they're going like, oh my gosh, I saw this podcast and now I know we got to do these things right away.
Yes. Yeah,
Thank
because
you
you're
for
not
your
told
time.
that. And the police are doing so many other things, the media is doing other things, then there's no step-by-step guide as to like what to do first. What are the steps? What don't I do? So,
Well, thank you. Thank you. I look forward to talking again. And certainly, if there's any progress or if you plan to do any travel, I'd love to know about that.
yeah.
You will be seen by students here. This will be a module in a class that I teach about the social media, but also how people can create content that's telling a compelling story and is effectively getting a message across. And we thank you for what you
That's
do.
awesome. Thank you. Thank you for talking with me. This is awesome.